Hello Warlocks, today I also have two builds for you that do not require any exotic class item. To those who are a bit more tuned into prismatic and build crafting, the first build I'll be talking about here is probably something you've heard about before, so if you're already familiar, maybe skip to the next, but it's a build that's been going very strong since before the raid even launched, and that is the buddy build with Getaway Artist. Getaway Artist is where you consume an arc grenade in order to get an arc soul. However, if you also use Bleak Watcher when you consume your grenade, you will also spawn a Bleak Watcher stasis turret, giving you 2 turrets, one of each kind. Now, if you want to go full buddy mode, you'd pick up Hellion, which would give you a 3rd solar buddy to really complete the set, and there are specific setups if you want to go that direction. However, Feed the Void, while a considerably more uninteresting choice, is definitely the more popular one, and unfortunately that holds true for many Warlock setups. Devour is just pretty good for a build that completely relies on consuming your grenade, and it's also just really good in general. Your grenade has to be arc, so scoop that up. And then many people opt for Arcane Needle for the multiple charges in order to help proc Devour, since the melee itself is dealing the big parts of the damage versus other melees which have more like utility roles. Fragment-wise, things are pretty open depending on how you want to play the build and what weapons you're going to be using. For me personally, Grace is an automatic pickup, specifically because I use Kvostov and I use it a lot. It is insanely strong, I have it on the most, it just makes sense. And then if I don't, I probably will have Microcosm on, which is also really, really good. It has literally nothing to do with the build other than getting you more Transcendence energy. That's it. Plus, in episode 1, you have Elemental Siphon, which is making fire sprites, if you're on Song of Flame, which I am, which give you grenade energy. Not that you're really going to be at a huge shortage of grenade energy. Sacrifice and Devotion both feel like auto-includes just because of what they do, but if you're on something like Kvostov, then that stuff isn't really going to be proccing as much. You're not slaying out with Arcane Needles, the Arc Soul isn't a murder machine or anything, the Stasis Turret isn't shooting that fast. They're still probably worth it to some degree, but if you wanted to flex out one of them, or even both, I think you could. Devotion is definitely more worth keeping around, though. Balance is maybe for those running with a Stasis or Strand primary weapon. Again, not that I think you're going to be at a huge shortage of grenade energy. I guess you could run it if you want to toss out some more melees with a light weapon. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. You'd think you'd want to avoid Facet of Dawn because you want to be throwing out really precise melees in order to trigger Devour. And if you're good with Orbs of Power in episode 1, you can probably ignore it, but I did find myself using my melee more often than I originally thought I was going to with this build. I think Solitude is really good for higher level content, even some mid-tier stuff to slow down bigger or boss targets, plus it has synergy with Devotion if you are running that. Now call me crazy, but with Elemental Siphon in the artifact, I'm running Honor. Now your fire sprites are giving grenade energy and light transcendence energy. You would think that you would have a surplus of light energy, but I was getting dark done first a lot because of the turret and tangles. When Elemental Siphon is gone, you can probably ditch this, maybe go to Awakening with a non-kinetic weapon. Of course, you got Purpose in here as well. I think that is fine. I'm running Grace, Devotion, Solitude, Purpose, and Honor. You should tweak as you see fit. In certain bits of endgame content, mainly solo stuff, Facet of Protection is something to be considered as well if you find yourself surrounded. The artifact is loaded with prismatic offerings, so just scoop them all up. You aren't really going to be weakening things, so you can probably skip Void Hegemony, but all the others, grab them. You're going to be amplified from Getaway Artist and Radiant from picking up Orbs. Once Radiant Orbs goes away, then maybe you scoop up Facet of Dawn if you want Radiant. My stats aren't too different from my normal Warlock setup. Hundreds in Resilience, Recovery, and Discipline, although you could probably go with less Recovery since you should have Devour rolling a lot. And if you have Song of Flame and Facet of Purpose, you should have Restoration as well. My mods are pretty standard, just focusing a lot on orb generation, ability regeneration, although leaning more towards melee since grenades shouldn't be an issue. Just pause the screen here if you want to take a deeper look. The build basically plays itself. You eat your grenade, you trigger Devour, and that's really the whole setup. You will get incredibly fast Transcendence using Kvostov and the things that I mentioned earlier. The only real negative is that your Bleak Watcher is going to spawn where you consume your grenade for the Arc Soul. So you can't exactly toss it somewhere, but more often than not, that won't really be a big problem. Bleak Watcher has a fair amount of range to it, and you should be getting your grenade back often enough that as you push forward in an encounter or in an area, you'll just make another turret. The big thing to monitor is Devour. Make sure you proc it, whether it's from your Arc Soul, an Arcane Needle, whatever. But it's very easy to lose track of if you have it or not, especially because we still only have 4 buff slots and it might just get lost in the sauce. Part of why the build is great is because it's not complex. Eat grenade, interact with things, use good primary weapon. That's 90% of the experience. It's not hard to get a handle on at all. It's not too deep. It's a good way to get into Prismatic without having to worry about ability combos and chaining this and chaining that or anything too intense. You can make it more complicated, but you can also just eat a grenade and shoot some things with a Kvostov. Like, that's fine. Best of all, this setup pretty much works anywhere, from the easiest of patrol zones to the most difficult of raids and nightfalls, lost sectors. My teammate was running it in the contest mode raid. If that's not validation enough, I don't know what is. I watched my boy Leopard solo Warden of Nothing Grandmaster Nightfall in 25 minutes with this setup. First try. Bleak Watcher covers multiple parts of champion stuns as well. You just need anti-barrier. Also, because the investment is so low and because the only thing you need is a grenade, you don't need to worry too much if you have a less than ideal use of your grenade. If you have a bad one, as long as you have Devour, you're going to get another one pretty soon. Bleak Watcher gets more effective the harder the content is, while Arc Soul still holds up decently as well, if anything, to help move your light energy meter along. Like, if you could only have one build forever, I'd probably recommend this one. I will say that just because you have a Healing Rift and Devour, that you're not unkillable in stuff like Legend and Master Law sectors. There are plenty of opportunities to get killed purely due to arrogance. It doesn't matter how many buffs you have, it doesn't matter how much stuff you got, you are not completely immortal. So just play carefully. In pretty much everything else, yeah, you're pretty darn close to immortal. Now here's the thing about Warlock. Devour's really good. And unfortunately, most of the premier builds use Devour to some degree. I originally had a Lightning Surge setup as my second build, but I didn't really find it that good outside of pretty low tier content, maybe some mid tier content. I just wasn't vibing with it, so I shelved it for now, and maybe we'll talk about it another time. This next build is, I wouldn't say a direct spin-off of the first, but it wants to accomplish a very similar goal, and that is just getting Transcendence as much as possible, but through different means and through different exotics, like Swarmers. We're heading back to Threadlings. Swarmers does the following. Destroying a Tangle makes Threadlings. Threadlings unravel targets, so that's going to apply darkness debuffs to everything, and we are going to leverage that into filling our Transcendence meter. As far as aspects go, I think you can make arguments for all of them to pair with Feed the Void. Weaver's Call, we want Threadlings. Hellion, we want light Transcendence energy. Lightning Surge, I think, is a little weak, but it does provide Jolt, and if you hit enough targets, amplified. Bleak Watcher, maybe not as much, but like, I get it. But also, if you're running Bleak Watcher, Feed the Void, just use the previous build. For this setup, I wanted to do Hellion because it's new and people want to play with the new stuff, but obviously you can flex whatever you want here. Now, when it did come to Weaver's Call versus Hellion, I think it depends on what kind of energy you are needing for Transcendence. If you're mainly using a light-based weapon, I think Weaver's Call might be the play. If you're mainly using a darkness weapon, then Hellion might be the play. It's all about making sure you're filling up Transcendence as much as possible, but efficiently as well. If you notice your darkness meter is full all the time, but your light meter is barely full, make some switches. Just, accommodate. Threadling Grenade. It's pretty obvious there. I think you'll have enough darkness stuff going on that I don't think you need Arcane Needle, but I think a lot of people are going to take it anyway. Incinerator Snap is nice to give a big boost to light energy if you can hit an ignition, which isn't too hard. Although if you're not running Weaver's Call, then maybe you don't need the extra light energy. Although I did end up preferring Incinerator Snap over Arcane Needle for reasons I will explain. Fragments. Hope is a decent choice. We're going to want Rifts for Hellion and for Weaver's Call, but you can probably live without it. Awakening is good to keep up melee charges since Devour is going to cover our grenade, but you do have to be using a stasis weapon to spawn those shards, so, just keep that in mind. If you do take Awakening, Honor is definitely something to consider as well to double up on the gains. I actually think I'm keeping Honor over Facet of Sacrifice, because even though you're getting ability kills, it's not as often as I think I'd like in order to use Sacrifice. I playtested both, didn't notice a massive difference in losing out on Facet of Sacrifice. Devotion is nearly a staple. You should be unraveling quite a lot of things. Balance is nice for the ability energy gains. Rapid kills should not be a big problem. I'm going to throw a wild card out here with Bravery. Threadling Grenade kills count for proccing Bravery. So if you want to throw on like a Commemoration or some kind of void weapon to take advantage of this, you could. This is also why you would want to stay on Arcane Needles if you're running a Strand weapon, because now you have Volatile and Unraveling rounds, or at least access to both of them. This gains more value when you need anti-barrier rounds as well. Just something to consider. I ended up on Awakening, Hope, Devotion, Balance, and Protection, but Protection can be flexed out in lower difficulty content for the Honor, Bravery, Generosity if you're in a team, Courage. I mean, you got a lot of options. Artifacts should be grabbing prismatic things, namely Radiant Orbs, Shield Crush, Transference, but also get Threaded Blast if you're using a Strand weapon. I know it's not as good as it used to be, but it's still there for the taking. If you use Lightning Surge, or if you're playing with someone who can give you Amplified, grab Galvanic Armor as well. Stats, I'm going Max Resilience, Discipline, and Strength, with Recovery getting any leftovers. If you wanted to max out Recovery over Discipline and Strength, I think that's okay. Maybe you're a Rift enjoyer, but you should try to have a healthy amount of ability stats, even with Devour. Maybe skew more towards Strength if you think you don't have any Devour-based issues. Mod-wise, I went more balanced, mix of gunplay and ability things. Siphon in the Helm is good, along with Ashes to Assets, since you should be throwing a lot of grenades, both Threadling and Transcendent. Arms, I got 1 firepower and some ability energy mods. Maybe if you wanted to go 2 firepower, if you think you're that confident in Transcendence, you could go 2. I just went with 1. Chest is resistances. Boots, I opted for no surges and instead went with orb pickup mods, and then I topped it off with some class ability boosts in the class item. The priority of the build is to make sure your first Threadling Grenade kills something. However you need to make that happen, do it. Weaken a target, then throw the grenade. Be precise. Devour is our engine for more Threadling Grenades, where we should be getting a lot of our darkness energy from. Drop a Rift to start the Hellion or Weaver's Call train as well. This will be supplying more energy for Transcendence. Ideally, you are then chaining Transcendence into a Song of Flame, which is going to max out your light meter, assuming you use it literally at all. If you're on Weaver's Call, make sure you pop your Rift even in your super for more Threadlings so that you can work on your dark meter at the same time while you're in a Song of Flame. Then focus on dark energy when your super is over, or even while your super is still running, along with a darkness weapon. You should be able to hit the back to back to back if there are a healthy amount of enemies. That's Transcendence into Song of Flame into a Transcendence. In lower tier stuff, I actually think this build might be a little much. You need a pretty healthy flow of enemies to really keep up the fun. And I'd say in more traditional strikes, maybe older strikes, even Breach executable on normal difficulty, you really need to command the arena in order to get the most value out of the build. When you hop into stuff like Battlegrounds or the Raid or solo content, those activities have enough enemies spawning that I think this build can justify its use a bit more. You won't feel like you have that downtime as much, like where you want to pop Transcendence or something, but you know the moment that you do, combat's going to be finished, and then you got to run somewhere, and then your buff runs out. Also, you're just more in control of the enemies when you're by yourself. When you do start hitting some higher tier content, though, just keep in mind, again, Devour does not make you immortal. Don't get arrogant unless you're in a Transcendence, and even if you are without Faceted Protection, or unless you're in a super, you're still very capable of dying, especially to dread-based units. Don't pop Transcendence into a crowd of enemies that are just going to nuke you. Do it in cover, drop a grenade or something, and then get out there. I know this seems like very basic advice, but trust me, it'll happen to you, because it happened to me. The reason I preferred Snap over Arcane Needle is because when you're Transcendent, which you will be a lot, I just think the AoE potential of Incinerator Snap proccing Ignitions is just so much better value for your melee. I know Arcane Needle gets 3 charges and you interweave them with the grenade and stuff, but the simplicity of Snap also really helps. It's just one melee, you snap, you hopefully ignite something, everything explodes, and then you move on. I could tell the difference in 2 Legend Lost Sector runs, with the one where I used Snap being my first attempt at the place. I did better on my first run with Snap than my second with Needles. Maybe it's just my preference, I don't know. I had a way better time using Snap over Needles when it comes to Transcendence. That being said, if you're in content where you can't get close to anything to proc Ignition from Snap, Needles are going to be the play. The counterpoint there is that you will now have an abundance of light energy and need to make that up with darkness energy. If you're on Weaver's Call, that shouldn't be a big deal, but if you're on Hellion, it might be a little more annoying. A Threadling Grenade and a Tangle should get you a pretty healthy chunk of dark energy, but I would definitely be running with some kind of darkness weapon just in case. Worst case scenario, you just plonk away with the Call for a few shots to stack up darkness energy, and then you're off to the races, or you bust out Pro Memoria, something like that. Otherwise, this is pretty much a different flavor of the previous build. The goal is to still get as many Transcendence procs as possible and leverage them into getting a super, which then you leverage into getting Transcendence, into a super, you get it. It's very easy to chain Transcendence into a super, into Transcendence for a long time's worth of boosted abilities, and when you can hit that chain, it's really satisfying. Anyway, those are 2 Warlock setups that do not need an exotic class item. Bleak Watcher Getaway Artist is arguably one of the best builds in the game, so go play it if you haven't been playing it already. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.